Alrighty, y'all. I see some stuff coming in the chat, which is great. Okay. Love that. Oh, grounding activities. Lane focusing on nutrition. Love it. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I am going to get started. My name is, welcome. Welcome to the webinar, The Importance of Nutrition and Physical Activity in Recovery. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Susie West, and I'm a Healthy Food Access Extension educator here with the University of Minnesota. And I have a background in public health nutrition, as well as some experience in treatment settings, including substance use disorders and eating disorders, as well as trauma-informed care settings. My colleague, Jimmy, is going to be here shortly, and he's going to be covering the physical activity and promotion portion of this. He has a background in physical training and is certified in a lot of different disciplines and has been a community health professional for a long time. He's really great. Like I said, he'll be joining us here in a little bit, but I figured I'll just give a little intro about him now. And then Sherry Schmidt, our fantastic, fabulous regional support staff. She's going to be acting as our webinar producer today. So she's going to be kind of helping monitor the chat and keeping track of some stuff like that. If you have any tech questions or that kind of thing, feel free to shoot her a message. I did see a chat come in that was directed to me about sharing the recording of this. And that will be something that Sherry can help you out with. And we're gonna get rolling here. All right, so a few objectives for today. I want to kind of identify some ways that substance use can impact nutritional status, eating habits, and what that might look like in addressing those in recovery settings. We're going to also go over how those in recovery can benefit from physical activity, as well as learning some strategies to incorporate nutrition and physical activity into the care of those in recovery. So when Jimmy and I were talking about this webinar, we wanted to really kind of think about how substance use disorder is really a condition that is so isolating and so stigmatizing. And we wanted to think about how we could frame things in ways that helps people reconnect, because that social aspect is so important. I mean, for human health in general, but in particular for building strong social connections during recovery, and how physical activity and nutrition can play a role in that. And we also wanted to think about how, you know, physical activity, recovery doesn't just happen in treatment settings. Recovery is also what goes on outside the four walls of a doctor's office, outside of therapy, outside of a day treatment center. And we also recognize that there are a lot of people who are caring for people with substance use disorder who may not be medical professionals. And we wanted to validate their experience and also make sure that they're included in this conversation that we have, as well as people who provide care or services in other aspects that might have a lot of interaction with people in substance use recovery. And Jimmy and I are very strengths based and wanted to kind of approach this from, you know, here's things that we're doing well, and instead of like a deficit based approach and like, here's things that you need to do better at, because substance use recovery is so, it can feel like there's so much that we're doing that, you know, a person is doing wrong, or so many things to keep track of. Like, let's celebrate what people are doing right. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is I want to kind of open this up. You can answer this question in the chat again, or if you feel comfortable and you want to take a moment and unmute and kind of answer this question. But I want us to think about and have some discussion about, you know, do you currently implement physical activity and nutrition strategies or interventions into your care for those in recovery? Again, whether or not you are in a specific treatment setting, or maybe you're caring for a loved one or spouse a sibling, whoever who is in recovery, are there any kinds of like approaches that you utilize that include physical activity and nutrition in that? So again, you can throw some of those in the chat or feel free to take a moment and unmute and share some of those because we're curious. Or if there are any like questions that you have coming into this webinar that maybe we can kind of keep at the forefront of our noggins as we head into this. Or is anybody implementing physical activity or nutrition strategies into care for those in recovery? All right. Wow. Currently in learning mode, not necessarily caring for anybody in recovery. Okay, so more general. Okay, good. Seeing a couple things come in. Yes, a little bit of a walk during the day. Love that. Sponsoring many people in recovery in addition to 12 steps. Looking at, yeah, a holistic approach. Love that. Great. We're all in the right spot then. All right, so now that we kind of have some people, yoga and meditation, love that. Gonna touch on that in a little bit as well. Great. So I'm gonna head over. I'm gonna ask you guys another question because I do kind of want this to be interactive if we can. I know that can be kind of hard with Zoom. How do you guys think, not you guys, how do y'all think that substance use might impact nutrition or nutritional status? Rapid fire. Anything, any ideas? I know that y'all know, or if you are in this realm mood, forget to eat. Yes. Lack of energy or maybe too much energy, maybe not able to focus. Yeah, lack of focus. Absolutely. I have to click on this one. Okay, using over that personal experience. Right, food or nutritional value, just kind of outside the scope of what we're focused on in substance use. Yes, overwhelmed by treatment and all their other responsibilities. Yes, okay, good. We're going to talk about that a little bit. So things that people have threw in here about how things might shift around during substance use are all correct, all right, okay? So there's this shift in spending right towards the substance away from food, and in particularly if we're losing sources of income, whether that's employment or other sources, housing, that kind of thing, that is going to result in food intake being generally decreased. And when it does happen, it tends to be less nutrient dense options, and they tend to be infrequent, right? There's also the fact that hunger and metabolism are really impacted by substance use, but also by not eating as much food. That can slow the metabolism down because our body gets used to maintaining bodily functions on less food. Also thinking about how like alcohol in particular is calorically very high, but doesn't have very many nutrients. And so there's a shift in what types, like where we're getting our energy from. The gut biome, so like all these little microbes that live in our gut, and there's, you know, tons of research that all basically says we know it's really important, but we aren't 100% sure on what or why or how. But we know that our gut biome impacts things like neurotransmitters, the processing of them, as well as the production of them. and hormones, a lot of different things like that, but also the GI tract itself is impacted by substance use, and different substances tend to have different effects on that. But in general, they all tend to make it very difficult for the body to absorb and utilize the food that is being taken in during substance use. So macro and micronutrient deficiencies and dehydration are really, really common in substance use. Really critical to have labs done to identify specific needs to be able to address those. And also important to keep in mind here that malnourishment doesn't have a body type, okay? You can be malnourished at any size. And we see that very frequently in substance use. So then in recovery, it can be really kind of hard to identify bodily cues. If we've gone long periods of time not eating, we have kind of desensitized ourselves to those bodily cues, but there's this shift in attention towards the substance, right? So hunger cues, low blood sugar, caffeine crashes or jitters, sugar rushes or blood sugar drops, right, can all feel really similar to substance cravings, and that can be really difficult to tease out. Relearning those body cues is really important, and also just kind of something to be mindful of. Snacks can solve a lot of problems, right? Snacks can really help us out. Also being mindful of caffeine intake, less than 400 milligrams a day is recommended across the board. I learned while researching for this webinar actually that over 400 milligrams of caffeine a day can actually alter our gut biome as well, which is interesting. So a couple of strategies that might be helpful for avoiding those low blood sugar crashes and hangry that can happen, those mood swings associated with hunger, is this strategy called Never Hungry, Never Full, which is basically that we just eat consistently throughout the day, whether that is 3 meals and 3 snacks, 3 meals and 4 snacks, just eating every couple of hours in general to avoid that, particularly when not quite in line yet with hunger cues, and having to relearn those can be a really helpful strategy. With that, it is helpful to pair a fiber with a protein source in order to stabilize the release of blood sugar so that, again, we don't have those blood sugar crashes, which can mimic substance cravings. So that would be something like pairing an apple with some peanut butter. An apple by itself has some fiber and some simple carbs in it, some sugars, right? And that on its own may get digested a little too quickly and utilized a little too quickly for the body and result in a blood sugar crash for some people. But when you pair it with some protein in the peanut butter and some fat in there, it's going to keep them satiated and avoid that. Could also be things like, doing some veggies and whole wheat crackers with hummus. That's going to have some proteins and some fats, some like Greek yogurt and some fruit. Getting those kind of mixes together, some whole wheat crackers and some cheese. There's lots of different ways that you could pair that. Also want to be really mindful that like substances and in recovery, there's a lot of experience for sweet cravings for high reward foods, right? Things that tend to be nutrient sparse and calorie dense. And it can be really hard to avoid those things. And so one way to address that is just to pair a less nutrient dense item with a more nutrient dense item. So having, a snack size Snickers and some apple slices, having some unsweetened Greek yogurt and a couple Oreos. There's a lot of different ways that you can pair those things. Again, a strengths-based approach, like how can we add some nutrients as opposed to thinking about what things we can take out. And those sweet cravings do tend to decrease over time. So just kind of being cognizant of that. And in recovery and during treatment, it is important to be mindful of other like complex medical needs, like HIV, hepatitis. There's a lot of different things that go on that are going to require special nutrition attention. Again, getting in touch with a registered dietitian, really helpful for that. But other things that are not necessarily related to, they're related to health and to nutrition status, socioeconomic status, right? In recovery, Again, somebody mentioned like being really overwhelmed by all these other things. And on top of that, now I have to cook healthy and eat healthy and do all these different things. Not everybody has access to food, transportation to go get healthy food, knowledge or skills to prepare that food and save that food. There's a lot, right? Food can be really stressful in and of itself. Okay, but some good news, right? Cessation of substance use really quickly has a positive impact on the GI tract and the gut biome. Love that. It's again celebrating a small victory, and like cessation of use is not just a small victory, like that's a pretty big thing. And just doing that one thing, even if you're not changing the rest of your diet, is already having a positive impact. So that's great. But then when you add in consistent eating, a varied nutrient dense diet is also going to help start to address and fill in some of those gaps that we're missing during substance use related to vitamins and minerals. Now, do have to say there is this like lore of utilizing sweet foods to like sub in for like substance use cravings. Like when you get a craving for that, you know, grab some candy. And the evidence is mixed on the effectiveness of that. There is some concern about, you know, subbing like one addictive thing for another thing. But also there's some evidence that seems to point to overutilizing sweets to address cravings early on could actually increase the risk of recurrence of use. I don't know, jury is still out on the usefulness of that. But again, those cravings for sweet things will decrease over time. It will get easier. And diet quality in general tends to improve in recovery, right? Because we're eating is the hope, even if it isn't, again, super, super nutritious, where we can add in some nutrition, that's going to automatically improve it. Okay, I feel like I've been talking really fast. Sorry, y'all. Can't talk about substance use disorder without talking about disordered eating and eating disorders. Also can't talk about recovery without talking about weight gain and body image. Weight gain, super common in recovery. If you go from not eating very frequently to now you're eating more consistently, weight gain is going to happen. And that metabolism may not rebound to what it was pre-substance use disorder levels, depending on the level of restriction that was happening during SUD. There's also these medication-related changes in appetite and metabolism, which are really common, whether that is medications being utilized to treat mood disorders that are co-occurring, or like medication-assisted therapy can increase appetite, slow down metabolism, lead to increased cravings, again, particularly for sweet things. Also, treatment environments don't necessarily tend to be super supportive of like physical activity, tend to be more sedentary, not always necessarily the most nutritious environment either. And also if people are coming in from being unhoused where they're used to walking a lot, maybe they went from being very active again to being pretty sedentary in recovery or in a treatment center. Okay, so thinking about eating disorders, there are a lot of similar risk factors and characteristics for both of these disorders. Both of them are complicated, they overlap very frequently, and they can be challenging to treat. Some risk factors that they share is this heritability, this genetic component, really, really important for both of those, as well as having a history of trauma. Some characteristics that are similar include things like emotional dysregulations, having these intense cravings, compulsivity. There's a secrecy element, this isolation element as well. In general, people who have substance use disorder are about 11 times more likely than the general population to have eating disorders. So that's really high. There's also really high levels of subthreshold eating disorders in the substance use disorder population, as well as disordered eating being really, really common. somewhere around probably 40% of those being treated for SUD, at least women, tend to have disordered eating habits as well. Should note here, there's a lot of research about eating disorders and substance use disorders in women, not a lot of research on men. Tends to kind of be how that is very gendered, which is unfortunate. And then there's this body image piece. Some people initiate substance use in order to lose weight. And that is a much bigger conversation that needs to be had about body image and disordered eating, right, in those cases. But body image isn't always just about weight. It can be about anything. And some approaches that are going to address body image and improve it, things like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, which both tend to improve SUD as well. Mindfulness and meditation, self-compassion practices, exercise, all of those things are going to be beneficial not only for body image, but for substance use recovery as well. Things that increase the psychological flexibility, learn some self-regulation pieces, super critical. Okay, so how might you incorporate nutrition into treatment or care for those? Seek out consulting with a registered dietitian, and actively be screening for eating disorders and disordered eating and address those things right away. Another way you could do things is adopting a culture of health, like making the whole environment supportive of overall health, including fruit as snacks during group, or having half of the snack options be fruits and veg, maybe the other half are less nutrient dense things. That's great. Again, thinking about where we can add as opposed to like where we need to take stuff away. Having unsweetened beverages available, just thinking about like little approaches that we can do that. Participatory nutrition activities, everybody has to eat. Everybody has to eat. And food is such a great connector. It's an opportunity to practice some social skills as well as practice some eating habits, model some healthy behaviors. Group meals in adults have also been shown to increase fruit and vegetable intake. Love to see it. Again, thinking about where we can add, not where we need to take things away. And group cooking, it's a skill builder. It develops this sense of self-efficacy and autonomy. And those things have been shown to improve eating habits and improve cooking knowledge. Also, I think on this cooking piece, that can be a segue into employment too, right? So there's a lot of different benefits to that. And then including nutrition education and programming, seeking that out, getting connected with your local SNAP Ed educator. They do all of this stuff and it's wonderful. Like MyPlate, I know MyPlate, it's been around, but it's such a simple visual that really people like get it, right? Half your plate, fruit and veg. You've got your whole grains, you have your lean, like hopefully a lean protein, and then you're good to go. And our SNAP Ed educators are really, really excellent at providing that education and meeting people where they are. And these have been shown to improve nutritional knowledge and eating habits. Other food-related things that aren't just about eating food or cooking it, think about taking trips to farmers markets and experiencing the different kinds of produce, learning about them, chatting with farmers, getting connected to your local food systems, planting a garden, but also thinking about how we can promote access to things like getting people registered for SNAP or WIC can be a really important component going forward in the recovery if they qualify for those. And I am going to shift it over to Jimmy, who is here, and he's going to talk about the role of physical activity and exercise in recovery.
Hi, everybody. I'll let you do the slides. Okay, I guess I got the slides. So welcome, everybody. I'm sorry I was a little bit late getting on. My name is Jimmy Johnson. I am a extension educator as well, and my focus is physical activity promotion, and I also am have been a personal trainer for 18 years now. Also, as you can tell, sometimes I do have a stutter, so I ask that you be patient with me as I go along today. So I just want to talk about a little bit here about the role of physical activity in recovery. The first thing I want to find out, is there anybody or out there currently that incorporates PA into their treatment program right now? So if you could maybe put that in the chat box or unmute. I'd just like to find out if we're doing anything right now currently. Go ahead. Looks like the YMCA long walks out in outside, weather permitting, says Bob. Okay. Next, Susie, can you advance the slide for me? Thanks a lot. So one thing that we do know is that addiction is a chronic disease. So it's like type 2 diabetes, cancer, heart disease, things like that. So the good news with that is through modifying our behaviors, we can be successful in helping to treat this substance abuse disorders. Good news is also too is that we know that the power of movement, exercise, is able to actually reduce the risk of all chronic diseases at the simultaneously. The good news is that. Next slide, Susie. So what I did is to look at some of the current research around the impact that physical exercise actually has on substance abuse disorder. This is a meta analysis study that came out in 2014. It was one of the biggest research projects to look at the impact that movement exercise actually had on substance abuse disorders. And what they were looking at is how it impacted, number one, abstinence rates was one of them. Number two was how it affected withdrawal symptoms during treatment. Three, it also was looking at the impact on the depression. And number four, looking at the impact on anxiety. So, and what that looked like, the impact of those positive impact was, next one, next slide. Yeah, thank you. So you can see that each of those four areas were positively impacted through movement. So incorporating exercise can help with all of these outcomes. Now realize too, the substances that they were looking at here were nicotine, alcohol, and then other illicit drugs were looked at. So that's the good news, positive point. Next slide, Susie. Another outcome that came from this meta study was looking at the impact of moderate and high intensity aerobic exercises, and also mind body. So with moderate high intensity aerobic, we're looking at things like biking or walking, anything that elevates your heart rate and keeps it up for at least 10 minutes, we say up to 1 hour. Every bit counts. But and then also the mind body exercises that they're talking about there. Mind body are things like yoga, tai chi, and also Pilates. And all of those movements there have an awareness of breath and awareness, and also they're also low impact as well. So those are all the doable things that we can add in as well. So, right, next slide, please. Another thing that physical activity can help do is promote resilience, and resilience simply is just the ability to adapt to your current environment, your current life situation. So wherever you're at, you're able to adapt. And there are 4 domains. We look at the mental domain, the physical domain, social domain, and then we also look at the spiritual domain. So movement has the ability to improve our mood, mental health, just even a little bit. A walk outside, even just getting up and stretching a little bit can help help improve mental outlooks. Physically, when we're movement can help us feel strong, we're healthy, we have endurance. From the social perspective, physical activity is a way to help connect us to others in a positive way. Maybe you've experienced that working out in a team or a group environment. So, and then spiritually, just the idea of putting things into perspective and having a greater sense of purpose in our lives. So physical activity has the ability to do all of those for us. Next slide. So really what we're looking at for somebody to really move forward into their recovery and maintain a healthy lifestyle, it is important that they work on all of these domains: the physical, the mental, social, and spiritual. And we can do that before, during, and after treatment recovery. Next slide, please. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about in terms of where we get our information on how much exercise we need, and guidelines, things like that. So I'm just going to refer you to what we call the 2018 Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, and this is developed from the Department of Health and Human Services. That's the public health approach to it. And then the actual fitness the types, how long, the type. Actually, the guidelines for fitness itself comes from the American College of Sports Medicine. So two of those entities are what develop the physical activity guidelines for Americans. And we're looking at best practices and evidence-based information. And then what's unique about this, the 2018 guidelines is they came up with a campaign called Move Your Way. And I really like this. This is kind of like the new way that we want to talk about and promote being physically active. So it literally is move your way. Movement should be fun and joyful. Those are two very, very important things. And so a lot of times we think about, going to the gym and, lifting the weights and, no pain, no gain. All of that has its proper role at the right time, right place. But in treatment, different people are going to be at different places in their health. So we want to just make it, guidelines where everybody can find something that they like to do for movement. So like literally say, walk, run, dance, play. What's your move? Another important thing is also, I think I said it here a little bit ago, but think about things that don't always look like traditional exercise. So things like taking the dog for a walk would count as movement. Just doing house chores, vacuuming dishes by hand, all of those things, taking the garbage out. Those are all things that also, add up towards physical activity each day. So literally move your way. Okay, next slide. I know that's a little bit hard there to look at there to see, but basically we're looking at how much, how long, and what type. When we talk about adults here, and here I have adults and older adults, both of them there. So the time that we're looking at, well, actually, I'm going to back up first. So no matter how long you move, there are some immediate benefits that all of us can get right away just from moving even a little bit. Number one, our mood, boosting our mood, which is better, outlook. It can also help to sharpen your focus, so concentrating becomes easier. Probably the biggest one for all of us is even a short bout of movement can reduce stress. And then also another important thing, it can help improve our sleep. When we talk about older adults, it just helps make it, physical activity can help everyday life be easier. So the everyday chores we have to already do just become a little bit easier through being more physically fit and active. Number two, it helps us to keep up with grandkids if that's something that that's important to us. I like to just think about it as more energy. Okay. And then also physical activity can definitely help us to stay independent for a longer period of time in our lives. So all those are the immediate benefits from being more physically active. Now, in terms of how long and what type. So for adults, we're looking at 150 minutes per week total time of being physically active. So it can be a little bit, 10 minutes here, a half hour here. Even sometimes people just do it, 1 day per week. They play, basketball or, something like that, a day a week. That's fine. Every bit counts, but we're looking at 150 minutes of, and of that, we're looking at some of that being that moderate aerobic endurance, so the walking, the bicycling, anything that elevates your heart rate a little bit, not too intense. You should be able to talk. We have something called the talk test. If you can talk, that's the intensity that we want to be at. The other component, and this is really important, within that 150 minutes per week, we want to have at least 2 days focusing on some type of muscle building movement as well. So that can be anything like body weight movements, exercises, so squats, lunges, push-ups. If you like going to the gym, or you have things at home that can be resistant bands and dumbbells and barbells, all of that. But the idea is that 2 days per week that your muscles are working harder than they usually do. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. And so then once again, too, we're looking, Susie talked about creating a culture of physical activity in your treatment program. So again, looking at what you're currently doing right now, what are some small and simple things you can do immediately to add physical activity into your current program? Remember, all physical activity is good. Everything, adds up. So here, I just have some thoughts, ideas. Maybe you have the ability to actually have a whole separate area for movement, and do, different types of fitness workouts and, weights or yoga, things like that. Susie mentioned the outdoor. So gardening is a wonderful form of being physically active. So gardening projects would count. Maybe going on hikes or walks. That's one way. You could think about partnering with like a church or someplace like Anytime Fitness or something like that. You could actually bring in a group fitness instructor, possibly have a personal trainer come in and talk to the group about the benefits of being, physically active, and just things like that. And then you can also think outside the box. So I have, horseback riding, dances would count. So those are some of the ways. It can also be really, like, if you're, really are having a difficult time with this, one thing would be just in your meeting, spending more time standing up and not, having everybody just sit down for, 1 hour, but actually you're standing up. You could have what we call energizers. Energizers are just these little short bouts of movement. They're like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5, up to 10, I guess. And you could, actually have each person lead a short, energizer each week, so that it's not just falling on one person. It's a collaborative approach, which is much, more fun, doable as well. So the one thing that we know is that people definitely like to exercise is more fun together, and social and environment, and that's wonderful. So again, here I like this poster here, Move Your Way. Just again, looking at all the ways to, be active with others. So dancing and, things like that. So I like that. So next slide. And then really, it also begins, this culture of, creating a culture of physical activity, just like nutrition. It definitely helps to have some, policy around this, just meaning that, that in your treatment program, there will be dedicated time to healthy eating and teaching people how to be more physically active. And that's going to help them be more, at the individual level, to be much more confident in their ability to be physically active, to cook, for them themselves. Just that overall self um, efficacy for caring for yourself. So people have the knowledge, the skills, and support to implement both of these things into their treatment program. And so again, through partnerships and just looking outside the box at what you can do. Susie talked about a benefits a strength-based approach to this. We also want to do this with being physically active, as well. Next slide.
If I could also just tack on
sure,
there
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
We realize that some people, you may not be able to change an entire treatment center or change, an entire program, but utilizing your own sphere of influence to make some subtle changes can also be really powerful, because that kind of flows both ways, right? Like an individual can influence policy and culture as much as the culture can policy of a place can influence individuals. And that, like, implementing these kinds of policies and focusing on increasing physical activity and healthy eating is going to have benefits for staff people as well.
Absolutely. I just want to pause here for just one moment here. So have any of these ideas that we talked about resonate with anybody? Is it anybody having some ideas that possibly they're thinking about that they could be taking home today after we're done? I'll just look for the chat box here. Short fitness breaks would help, yeah. Energizers. So like Susie, she also had, some ideas here for supporting. So with physical activity, this also counts here. Collaboration with partners. You could, like I mentioned, hire a group fitness instructor, personal trainer. Actually have if you did have champion, somebody really interested in physical activity already, you could contact me personally, and we could talk about how to train that person to lead physical activity in your treatment program as well. Grants are out there, funding opportunities. So yeah, those are just some of the ways to incorporate more physical activity and that culture that we talked about. Next slide. Yeah. I think that's going to be it for today for my part. So then if you needed a certificate of participation, there will be a webinar evaluation on the next slide for that. We appreciate if you would fill that out for us. And then we have some upcoming webinars that you can look at as well.
And actually, Jimmy, this is
Yeah.
Sarah. I think these
Oh.
are a list of webinars from last spring. And so our current webinars are almost over, but we encourage folks to watch for an email, and we'll be sending that out late December, probably early January, with a listing of our new upcoming webinars from January through April. So please watch those, and this URL that Jimmy has here is a great website to go to, where you can find out all the webinars and events and courses happening through the University of Minnesota Extension.
And with that, you can feel free to engage with us on social media. We've got several sites, but also want to open this time up for questions, since we do have a few minutes before the noon hour. I saw a chat about wondering about pros and cons of a person in recovery being responsible for a pet. I think that is going to be so case by case. You know, kind of assessment. But there is some evidence that says that, you know, pet ownership, people tend to be more active and getting outdoors. So again, probably going to be a case by case thing that you consult with a provider about. But that's a great question. And I did want to mention too, if you are looking for example policies that you might implement for either worksite wellness, or ideas about how you could form some policies potentially for a treatment center, or even just a group meeting kind of thing, looking at school wellness policies and worksite wellness policies can be a really good starting point. There are a lot of templates available online. I think MDH even has some. Some of them are pretty like lengthy and like pretty complex, and you know, you don't have to get that complex. You can start simple and just kind of set some boundaries around how you utilize your time in incorporating physical activity and nutrition. But again, we've still got some time for questions, and then we'll shut it down pretty soon.
Also, too, if anyone wanted to get a handbook of energizers that they can, you know, actually use, contact us, and we can get you a whole list, hundreds literally, of short little activities that you can implement immediately in your group. Minimal gear, no gear, just yeah. So good place to begin if you want that as a resource. Thank you guys. Appreciate your support for being here today with us.
Uh-oh, is this?
It's a survey active emotion.
Oh.